The Old School is brought to you by Ahart Solutions, which provides school surveys and applied research. More information at ahartsolutions.com. Good morning. Finally, 2 weeks after our last episode, we are back again. None of these things are planned. Stuff happens. But here we are again, the Old School Podcast, a podcast about the American education system and all other things in between. Basically, whatever interests us. Are you okay over there?
Yeah, I was trying to prevent myself from laughing or spilling my coffee or both.
Pause button over there. It's called the mute button.
Oh, okay. Um, are you still there, Miller? It looks like you froze during your introduction.
Well, I am, of course, using I'm plugged into the wall, so I'm good.
Oh,
But
you were frozen just like the old days.
I know.
It was about a good 4 seconds of you in one position, unless you were posing.
Maybe. Well, yeah, what I could do is I could just pretend as if I am frozen.
Why don't you finish your introduction here, Miller?
Let's try it. Let's try it. 4 seconds. Here we go.
This is really bad, dead air. One of the rules of radio you don't want to have.
Oh no, you can have dead air if it's a pregnant pause, as the kids say. I don't know if the kids say that.
Nobody says that. Um,
So
so who are we?
anyway,
And what are we doing? This is the old school. You were
oh,
almost
this is the old
later.
school. I'm Ross Miller, and along with my very good friend, Dr. Stephen Bourgeois. Good morning, sir.
Herr Miller. It seems like two weeks is an eternity. You lost your whole ramble, and now we're back starting from zero.
Well, no, I had to reset,
Yeah.
and let's go ahead and let's identify the elephant in the room,
Okay, dude.
and then that is our 2 week hiatus. With, as I said, none of these are ever planned. And to be frank, it's usually you who bails on the podcast. So wow, I can't do it. I'm going to be here, even though I have done podcast episodes from around the world. Uh, you cannot be bothered, but
I've never missed a podcast. I almost uh, did one. I did both sides of one. I thought about that when you were on one of your gallivanting trips. I was gonna do one person who was very reasonable and one person kind of flailing around and do a dialogue and do both parts. But uh,
which one am I supposed to be?
the flailing around.
I don't flail.
You're
That sounds
physically moving your
undisciplined.
arms when you're talking. You
No,
actually gesture on the camera.
I'm gesticulating, but I'm not flailing. I mean, flailing sounds undisciplined. It's like
Flailing has to do with what you're saying as much as what you're doing with the hands. But you're accusing me of missing our days. I'm right here at 11 o'clock every Saturday.
I'm just well, you may be there. You're not doing you may be somewhere every Saturday 11, but I'm just saying for the record, and I think all the listeners should know this, that of the two of us, the one more dedicated to providing insight, intellect, thought-provoking conversations with just a dash of humor, that's me.
Okay. You're just like those guys with the at the Muppets show in the back.
I love those guys. Statler and Waldorf, I think was their name. So
Only person who knows their actual names.
I bet you there's other people that know their names, but
Oh,
anyway, so I want to start with the tip of the cap. Though I don't have a cap on, metaphorically, I am tipping my cap to a good friend of mine who passed away this week rather suddenly. But you oftentimes you talk Renaissance men, and Renaissance men have this kind of connotation of being people that you just see in the movies. You don't really see them in real life. And this guy is a Renaissance man. He's the most interesting man in the world. He's all these different kind of personas that we see in media. He was like that in real life. He was equally adept with a wrench in his hand as he was with a scalpel. He actually started teaching high school auto mechanics, and then he goes to medical school, becomes a doctor, starts learning how to do all that, and he just had this wide breadth of experience that came out of East Texas, and then later on for a long period of time in El Paso before moving to the Metroplex. But he was a man of honesty. He was a man of directness. Some would say sometimes to a fault. But he was a man that you knew where you stood with him. He was straight with everybody. And in a time when people are trying desperately to be liked and to be nice, he found it more respectful to be direct and to be honest. And that honesty and that directness defined him. And it's probably what made him a great doctor. I know it's what made him a good teacher. And he was one of one and a remarkable man, Dr. Mike Smith. So there you go.
Well, condolences. Thank you for sharing, Herr Miller. And we've never done that. And as we get older, we're going to be, uh,
Joining him more, unfortunately.
yeah, for sure. But I think I did meet him at one of your gatherings.
Mhm.
It's coming back now. That's all. That's tough. How old was he, if I may ask?
You would ask me that. I think he
Well,
was in his mid 60s. He was way too young.
yeah, yeah,
He left us way too soon, but he made a difference.
yeah.
And I think if it can be said well of anyone, it could be said well that he made a difference. And so there you go.
Well, thank
Right.
you
So
for
anyway,
kicking us off, and now transitioning to,
rather clumsily as I transition to the topic at hand.
well, it's
But the topic of hand
yeah.
deals with a kind of conversation that I overheard. I saw like on TV or something like that. And it talks about the long road and the notion not just literally, although that can have its own qualities as well, but more figuratively the way people arrive to the various stations in their life and what is the value of your dreams not being realized till much later on than you expected? What does it mean to have those obstacles, to have those things in your place? Both of us, I think, to a certain degree, have lived that long road. When you think about your experiences and everything that you've endeavored to do over the years, what do you get the most out of the failures? What do you get most out of the setbacks?
It's a real hard question here, Miller.
It's what we do here at the Old School Podcast. We
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
hard questions.
cutting questions right out of the gate before even drinking enough coffee to.
Coffee, okay, yeah.
So this is a how you pause before you start thinking
Mm.
about an answer. But um, I will say that we remember our regrets, and those are as alive as anything, and that's kind of the tragic part of it. And a lot of things in the middle uh, we kind of it blurs, but the things that are challenging, the failures, I mean, they're constant, and those slip in all the time too. We do remember those, and I mean, it's really hard to avoid cliches about failure, but those are the best. It's the best teacher for sure.
So what is something that you do now that came out of failure? What I mean, like you said, it's very easy to get pithy with this, and it's very easy to just start spouting pablum at some point. But is there's because for example, so one of the things that I used to talk about with my American history students is that if you want to be able to explain the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, all you have to do is look at the various parliamentary bills that were passed between the 1760s and the 1770s, and it's almost a direct correlation between what the British did and then what was in the Bill of Rights. And it's just kind of like a reset, an attempt to try to take a lesson of the things that have been experienced or learned or suffered through and try to use it as a deliberate, meaningful catapult to something better, to something hopefully more rewarding. So, is there something that you can see a mistake or a problem that because you're able to turn it around, it led you forward rather than just being mired in the failure?
I can give you a couple of them that were
Okay.
pretty early. I don't really talk about these very much, but now I'll talk in front of God and everyone. Um, but the
Why talk if no one's recording? So,
That's right. Yeah. What's the point at all?
yeah.
But they're both music, and one I was playing a sonata, which is a short piece by Mozart, um, with an orchestra. This I think it was in seventh, probably maybe eighth grade, and um, and so the orchestra was playing with me, and that's not normal, but to have an arrangement for for piano and strings for a sonata, but we found one, and so we played this piece at all the elementary schools. So we were junior high, and so we were the big kids, and we went to I think three different junior highs and performed it in their gyms or whatever, and it went really well, really well. And the third time, it was, I guess I knew more people. It wasn't my old school, but it was another one. Somehow I had a blip of, and it was really just two measures, which is like 8 beats. But recorded it. There was a recording of it, and I couldn't believe that I had had this brain freeze, and I recovered in about 8 beats and finished, but it was traumatic as hell,
Mm.
and so I forgot about all the other three, all three performances, but those 8 beats, really freaked me out because it's a helpless feeling, and unless you're in on stage in front of people and you're completely lost, and so that
And this is probably one of those things that unless you are a trained musician, you probably
it,
wouldn't have even
no,
picked up on it.
it's the worst thing. Yeah, that you wouldn't. Yeah, but internally after all the practice. But anyway, that wasn't the first time it happened. Ninth grade, and this was a bigger deal. I was in high school, and there was a bit of a competition between myself, who was a 10th grader. That's when we started high school then,
Mhm.
and there were three other pianists, girls actually, who were older than me, and somehow I was doing this concerto, another Mozart actually concerto, and 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 so I had a lot of eyes were on it, but we played at Oregon State University in this
Wow.
place, and so yeah, so it was a kind of another big performance, and it was the same type of thing. I was reading the music, so it wasn't a memorization issue, but somehow I jumped a line, and I I think that was probably recorded too, but it was the same type of thing. There was a recovery, but when you kind of freeze, it's difficult to look ahead or behind or anything. You're just sort of, I mean, it's a frightening moment. And then the good thing about a concerto is that there are places where the orchestra plays by themselves, so you can jump back in. Uh,
Right.
but that was, I mean, it it had a major long-term effect as far as how I prepared for, because that was really the last time. And what I realized is that you practice in sequence often, so you're used to playing something, but you don't ever start practicing like from these odd places. And that's what you need to do to be able to recover quickly. And so
Right.
recovery was something that was out of I never even thought about it. I never thought it could happen. It's a failure of
Mhm.
imagination. But the idea is that you should know the piece so well that you could start in any place and recover, and also musically not be just thinking about numbers and the patterns that you're playing, but know the theory enough that you know what you're doing and you can recover out of it. And so I've developed the idea that wherever I am, I can recover to the point where it's fractional, if anything. And so that was it was a big deal, and I mean, it could have probably almost stop me from performing. It was that bad, for myself. And again, nobody, like you said, nobody probably noticed it. But in turn, I thought that was a bad one, And so but that was in late 70s, and since then I changed my whole habits of practice because of that.
Now, is this kind of condition, is it so common among musicians that there's a set way? Is this where you learn to start learning how to practice by practicing in the middle or the beginning or the end or what have you? Was this something that you had really never heard anyone else talk about? Was it something that you ever thought maybe it's just because I'm being recorded, maybe I'm kind of freezing a little bit? What guided you towards the answer? Is this something that is common for musicians at the beginning of their uh, training?
It happens all the time. I mean, a lot of musicians, I mean, when you're doing a solo, typically you memorize the music. And so that then it's a lapse of memory. And you can be just floored if you don't have music. I happen to have music in front of me. So you just find the place. It just becomes this, everything speeds up. So where am I? Where am I? And then you find it and then you're uh, but playing with an orchestra, they're moving along
Mm,
with you anyway. But if you're doing a complete solo, yeah, you're just sort of stuck. You fall off a cliff
right.
way, and then you can. So what you do is you just start. Everybody knows it. You just come back in wherever you want, and hopefully it goes better. But there's something that I've noticed, and maybe this will help, philosophically, of what you're getting at with this episode, is that after you make a mistake like that, and in playing jazz, you make mistakes too.
Mm,
You'll play a note that's sour, and then you learn to turn it into something and say, "Oh, I really meant that," and then you get ideas from it. It's a creative thing. But after a mistake in classical music or anything, you tend, at least I do, to get a lot more aggressive.
mm,
And it's behind you, and you get this adrenaline rush, and suddenly you're more assertive and you're playing better. So after that first little, because you think perfection, I want perfection. I guess I learned later on that it's not about perfection at all. Even, particularly playing classical music, there's in the microcosm getting really small, there are micro mistakes all the time. I mean, there's nothing perfect. There's always approximation, but you get more aggressive and more natural, and you're playing fearless after you
mm.
make a mistake. And I think that might apply to the life lesson.
When I think about classical music, though, I think about an exact science. I think about a focus on the minutia, the focus on detail. If there's one thing that can describe you, is your kind of your relentless pursuit of details, understanding things at the smallest level. Jazz always struck me as a much more forgiving art because it's a much more improvisational art. And so it allows you to kind of bounce back. I say this as a non-musician, but it seems like it would be easier for you to bounce back from any particular miscue in jazz as opposed to playing classical music. Um, is that maybe not directly or certainly not consciously, but do you think your love of jazz music and love of playing jazz music is in part because of that freedom, that kind of improvisational nature to it?
Um, yeah, I mean, with classical music, there's still interpretation, on every beat and every note you're playing. The difference is that if you're playing a piece that other people know, and most of the pieces you do are relatively well known, everybody's waiting, and they have an expectation of each note that you're playing. And so,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, with jazz, there is, that nobody has that kind of expectation, so error goes away a little bit. So I think in general, it's more free.
You
And
talked about the idea of kind of embracing the notion that perfection is not necessarily something that should be strived for. And I've said this quote before, both on the podcast and also with us privately, the famous quote by Thelonious Monk that said that perfection was not interesting. Do you think that your move to kind of accept less perfection, or not to have that as a goal, do you think that was part of your response to the errors made, or just a general kind of change in philosophy about music?
Well, I had another jolt early on when I just started college. I was on a music scholarship. I was in a practice room, um, doing what you do for many, many hours in a practice room. And and then I stopped playing because I noticed next to me in a practice room, there are people to your left and to your right.
Right.
And I heard this person playing Chopin, something really hard. And I stopped playing and I listened and I realized in about 10 seconds that this person was miles beyond me, and that was the first time in my life I'd experienced that. And I thought, oh man, I'm starting pretty low here. I mean, this person is, and and so there are levels. That's kind of what I learned in classical music. And so initially, when I transitioned to jazz, it was because those levels were, pretty drastic, to get to that point. And then I realized that, what I could do is improvise and learn a different type of music where I know the piano. I don't. It's different than knowing all these finger patterns and how to technically, because there's so much technical work. And I think that the technical work to get to this transcendent art form was a lot. And it was, to me, I took in what I think is a more direct approach to expression, which is to learn to relearn the piano so that what I think I play, and that's what classical pianists can't do. Without that score, they're just going to be sitting there naked. They can play their memorized pieces, but they can't create out of nothing. So that appealed to me.
This might be part of what the long road should be characterized by, and that is the kind of the expression of endurance, your ability to be able to work through things. My father, I used to, when I was a kid in my neighborhood, you either had to know how to fight or be funny. And, at times I could do both. I fought a lot, but then I could also be funny. If wasn't interested in fighting, then I would shift to being funny, and that met with various degrees of success. But my father always said that no matter how tough you think you are, there's always somebody tougher. And for me, it put me mentally in place to understand that when I set out to try to accomplish something, that I had to be careful about what I hoped to gain, because there was always someone better than me.
Mhm.
And I was always going to be better than other people. But the notion that there was always going to be someone better than me taught me that, one, there's still a reason to persevere. There's still a reason to endure. And that all these things kind of build to create a different kind of person, and perhaps, hopefully, a better kind of person. Um, Marcus Aurelius wrote that nothing happens to anybody that he is not formed by the nature of bearing something, and that part of that comes from this notion of what we gain from the struggle, and what we gain you know from the ability to go through the struggle. Nietzsche wrote, to those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill treatment, indignities, because I wish them the only thing that can prove today whether one is worth anything or not, that one endures. You have talked a lot about, both privately and on the podcast, you've talked a lot about your ability to just soldier through, to be able to put your shoulder to the grindstone, as it were, and just keep powering through. Was that something that you were taught for its value, or was that something that you were taught as a habit, and it was only later on that you learned the value of it?
I, those things do sort of develop gradually.
Mm.
but initially, for some reason, this really crazy, twisted, psychotic, I'm running out of words, um, desire to compete and to, I guess, by competing, you're, it's a form of domination. And
Mm,
when you were citing Nietzsche and his famous doctrine, the will to power, and that idea is it's more than just power; it's the will to overpower, to so that there's no doubt, and to do that is often, I guess my approach was always and still is to today is to prepare and to put in the one thing you have complete control over is how you spend your time. And
mm,
and so it's always been just doubling down on certain areas and tripling down and putting in this crazy amount of time, but also learning the methodology. I think I learned a methodology of practice that transfers, to certain things. But as we all know, there are areas where I'm completely incompetent,
mm.
and we all have our,
We
and
all
so
have them.
you mentioned your friend with the wrench and
The scalpel.
yeah, yeah, I'm not the person you want to wield either of those instruments. And and I probably couldn't even find the hospital without GPS. I mean, so but I have tended to hunker down in certain areas. But even now when I'm working, for my business, the term I use is break myself. I keep working and pushing through doing these things, and eventually I hit this. I almost freeze. Like, okay,
Mm,
and myself. There's an image of. Did we ever watch the film Chariots of Fire? I think we did, didn't we?
yes. Yeah. I had seen it before, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, but there's a moment with the runner Eric Little, the British runner, the Christian, who
Yeah.
was
The
running
Christian.
a 400 meter. It was before the Olympics, and somehow he was winning the race, and he tripped, and it all got slow motion, and people were running ahead of him, and he he turned, and you could see the look on his face that
Yeah.
he's going to chase them down, and that's what he did, and he basically ran himself practically to death, and he beat them. But it was that turn that I love, and just that look of determination, and there was a lot buried in whatever that actor did, but it was
Mm.
also rage, competition, all these things. And so when that's in there, there are times when that kind of comes out. Um, but I like that image, I guess, of saying, well, this is just work. I can do that part.
And it goes to what you were saying about after the mistake, you get more aggressive.
Yeah.
You start to become more emboldened. I think a lot of people get dejected by mistakes.
Mhm.
They get deterred by mistakes. But in this can be part of
Uh-huh.
that those lessons of the long road is the idea that there's nothing to be gained. In sports they talk about not letting a mistake beat you twice, where you suffer a defeat one time because you made a mistake, but you're constantly thinking about it the next game, and then you end up losing again. Turning it around rather, and using it as a source of, maybe in the immediacy it's anger, or being upset at yourself, but ultimately it's about how you recover, how do you learn, and how do you change from mistakes.
You can hear that with, I love watching piano competitions. I just watched the whole Chopin competition from Warsaw. And the same thing when you hear, I mean, you can hear a mistake and the reaction is just pissed off.
Yeah.
But that energy turns into this beautiful thing after. It's like
Yeah.
they're they're playing perfectly. But it's kind of talking about, well, we're talking a little bit about fear. Fear is behind a lot of this, and I think there's, competition. It's not about just winning, but it's also you're afraid to lose, and that it's like this humiliation, whatever it is. But so competition has two sides to it. We were talking before air that I was going to be watching some UFC, some mixed martial arts, this
Right.
afternoon and this evening until very late in the evening. This woman, this fighter who is a Chinese fighter and moving up to fight for a championship against a legendary fighter, Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, one of the greatest of all time.
Hmm.
And and she was talking about and I could be muddling this with a couple of things I've seen lately, but
Right.
um, that in Chinese, the word fear has a lot of meanings, and superimposed upon fear is opportunity,
Mm.
and so they're actually one concept. And so when you're afraid of something like what she's doing, this great move, there's also opportunity in that. And it's a matter of looking at fear differently. And
Hmm.
because you are risking all kinds of things, but that's where opportunity is also. And I think that's a concept, that's maybe missing maybe more and more with our youth. We
Hmm.
talk about boys now who aren't, leaving their basements, they're playing video games, they're not risking going out
Hmm.
into the world. And so fear and opportunity, seem to, I think they do fit together. And I think that's a piece of this puzzle.
I'm sure it would be too easy to say that today's generation is more risk adverse and they have less of an ability to endure, because certainly perhaps the same thing was once said of us as we were making our way through the school systems of
I
either
don't think so.
Oregon or Maryland. But I do wonder about the idea. What's is there anything different now, or is this just a phase that, I mean, because you can't really teach endurance. I mean, you either have it or you don't have it. It has to be either something practice or something not practice. And so we're not talking about, learning your multiplication tables. We're not talking about, learning the periodic table. We're talking about, how willing are you to pick yourself up and carry on. Um, I don't think that's teachable. I think maybe only through modeling can you do it. I mean, so if you were confronted, all your kids are grown, but I mean, if you were confronted with a kid that simply had a lack of it, I mean, how do you instruct that? How do you teach that?
Well, I mean, we wrote on this here, Miller, and I think we said that what the kids need is a hard school, and
Right.
and it needs to be, and often that doesn't come about in a classroom. It can, but it comes from the athletic field, from
Mhm.
the practice room, from but school can contribute. But I do think that there's something about a risk and being willing to put in extra effort. And
Mhm.
that's the complaint of employers,
Mhm.
of a generation or a generation and a half or two generations of employees is, they'll do what's required and then they'll get in their car and drive home.
Right.
And so risking, putting in extra effort, you're putting yourself out there for failure. You're
Mhm.
potentially making waves. You know, you're getting out of your comfort zone. So I do think that the ability to take risks professionally is a problem, and it creates a generation of workers who are maybe going to be replaced, because of
Right.
that attribute. And one thing that they can do is have this incredible amount of effort. And what we learned is that we want to show that effort. I mean, we have an employer, we want them to see what we're doing.
Mhm.
And so there seems to be this ethos of I'm not gonna do any more that's required. I'm kind of keeping my head down and then I'm leaving. That's I don't think I've ever had a job. I mean, as teachers, that's not how we were. We
Right.
get quite differently. But I run into this idea. I'm taking I'm working for what's required and no more. So it
It's
seems dull. It seems dull to me as a way to approach your work.
it is a bare minimum approach.
Hmm.
But in my conversations with kids, it's also wrapped up into kind of a quasi ethos that says, I don't care what other people say, or I don't care what other people think.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, because usually when you sit there and you try to explain why do you endure, why do you put in the long hours, why do you put in all the effort, part of it is to make sure that other people can see the effort, it can see
That's
your
how we grew
value.
up. That's how we grew up. It's not being Machiavellian. I mean, I always wanted to be at my place of work, if it was teaching or in a corporate setting, before my boss, my supervisor, and leave after. And that
Right.
was a guarantee that I would never be seen coming in by down,
Hmm.
or leaving while they're still working. And
Right.
so that, yeah, I think not caring about that is, in a way, eh, not taking a risk.
Hmm.
And this is the safest way. I'm just not going to bother. But then people are comfortable moving jobs, and I don't know if that's going to stay. I think that people are eventually going to hunker down into their jobs because it's going to. I mean, think about all the college kids who can't get jobs now. These nice degrees. I think once they find a job, maybe they will see the light and say, I need to start impressing people because that's, it's kind of looked down on, but that was just how we worked.
There is something to the idea of thinking that reality is the great equalizer, that eventually that the realities of someone trying to do anything will ultimately teach what being in a classroom cannot teach. As you were saying, you can teach it, but it's more impactful if it's experienced. That what some of these young folks will find out is that, you can do this, but it's not going to really work out for you, and it's not going to produce the results that you wanted to produce. Everyone who wants to be a live streamer in their life, people pay them to watch them play video games. I'm not saying that it's not a worthy endeavor. I'm not here to yuck anyone's yum, but I mean, but to me, the idea is that there are life lessons and that can be gained from how things have been done in the past. Now, I know that we're currently in a phase where things of the past are not treasured and not valued. We also wrote about that in the book about the fact that people do not take seriously the lessons to be learned from how teaching used to be done. And for all of its problems, there were merits.
Hmm.
But modern education throws the baby out with the bathwater, and ultimately, what they end up with is a rather imperfect, heavily flawed system. And I think it's the same with the kiddos. I mean, they're growing up thinking nothing of value came before them. They are the new creation, and then so they kind of see themselves as creating a new paradigm, but ultimately the reality doesn't work that way. There will be a course adjustment, and the question is, will they be able to adjust? Will they be able to endure?
So they would have. I mean, we've never had a young person on our show, have we?
Uh, my daughter showed up once to introduce us, but I
That's
mean,
right. That
that's
was
the only
fun.
time.
Yeah, but they would probably say that we're work obsessed and so performance driven that we've lost our way, and they would probably be laughing at us right now.
Well, they certainly wouldn't be the first 18-year-olds who thought that they had figured it out. But I mean,
Really?
yeah, I mean,
Oh, nobody get. They don't get.
You think you're breaking any ground here, buddy? I was the same way at 18. I thought my dad was, and so, so yeah, I mean, I think, it's like, you know what it's like? It's like the one kid in class who thought that they were the first one to find something funny out of the word Idaho. Idaho, Idaho, it's like they think in their world that they're the ones that came up with it. So you're like, you idiot. People have been saying that for decades. What are you talking about? And so this notion that and again, it's easy for us to sit here and take pot shots at
Oh,
millennials and the new generation. because it's just so easy to
Oh, they're
do.
nice.
But
They're nice people, and
they're nice people.
they have all
And like
kinds
I
of
said,
attributes. I could list
yeah.
them.
But I think it's I think there is a course correction. And it's just like any kid who went through school thinking that they were the center of the universe and they walk out of school and find out they're on the far, far outer edges of the hinterlands of what's important and what's at the center of things. And then that will either correct them and they will either adjust and endure or they won't.
Wow. Well, there's a element of self development that seems to be embedded in what we're talking about. I
Mm,
mean, and you spend a lot of your time doing things that are altruistic learning. I mean, you're
mm,
learning foreign languages, you're learning all this stuff. What is it that pushes you to keep doing that? Because I mean, this has nothing to do with a job. You're not
mm.
preparing for something, but you're developing, and I think that's been consistent for you.
So, not to evoke pop culture, but there was a
You're
TV
about
show
to.
that,
You're about
yeah, I'm about to.
to.
However, but no, there was a scene in Ted Lasso. It was a very famous scene, and a lot of people probably saw it. You know, with him playing darts with the owner of the club, at the beginning, Rupert or whatever his name was, and he talked about the fact that all my life I've been surrounded by people who thought they had everything figured out, and that because they thought they had everything figured out, they judged everything and they judged everyone, and they never bothered to ask questions. And since my daughter was old enough to understand, I've told her the importance of asking questions. Uh, now, there's other lessons that has to be learned, like when not to ask questions, or what to take from the answers to the questions. But the notion of always being curious is is at the center of a lot of what I do. So when I'm reading a book or I'm studying languages, or I'm studying history because I'm constantly reading, part of it is with the understanding that no matter how much I know so very little about it. You know, someone from, an administrator might hear me speak German and think I'm fluent, as administrators are want to do from time to time. But there's so much. I mean, I probably know 2% of German, that all there is to know about German. But I could go to Germany and I can conduct myself accordingly on the streets of Berlin or wherever, and I'd be okay. But even having that ability and even having the confidence to talk to people doesn't mean I'm not aware of everything I don't know. And so what drives me is not the attempt to try to know everything, because that's not possible, but simply to know more than what I know now. There's a darker reason as far as the trying to learn other stuff. My father suffered from dementia, and um and he was a brilliant man, but I mean, at the end, everyone talks about a dignified end. I don't see any dignity in dying. I don't see any dignity in going out. I think it's all crap. And no matter how you go out, there's nothing of value in those last moments. And so the effort to try to stave that off as much as possible. I don't want to live forever, but I mean, at the same time, I want my life, what there is of it left, to be mentally productive, intellectually rewarding. I want to have good conversations. I want to be able to read good books. I want to be able to learn more things, because I mean, why else are we here? We can't be here to play video games. We can't be here to play to do whatever. I mean, there has to be a reason. And absent of a job, the reason is self-improvement. You know, you could say that I have a function in life, and then my function for a while was a teacher. I did that for about 3 decades, and then I said, okay, that's enough. And then I now I'm doing other stuff. I'm doing other things that I'm interested in, and I'm still maybe picking up work here or there just because who doesn't like more money? But at the same time, it's all still built around this idea of just trying to pursue and learn more stuff.
Glad I asked that question here, Miller. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, oh yeah, there's a lot of insight in there, and it almost had a prose poem quality to it because it does. I mean, it does. It sums up a lot of things, but it explains a lot of things, and people wonder, well, what do you get out of it? Why would I do this? And but that's your answer.
Yeah.
It's the I mean, it's the one thing that people can't take away from you. Is what
Well,
you're accumulating
it
day to
also,
day.
well, yeah, I mean, that was the, uh, let me read something to you. And it's
Yeah.
something uh, I have had in my classroom my entire career. And I have it now in my sanctum sanctorum, my office. And it's in a cheap plastic, ridiculous frame with no glass. And it's just a piece of paper inside of it. But it says the following: "The best thing for being sad," replied Merlin, beginning to puff and blow, "is to learn something. That is the only thing that never fails. You may grow old and trembling in your anatomies. You may lie awake at night listening to the disorder of your veins. You may miss your only love. You may see the world about you devastated by evil lunatics, or know your honor trampled in the sewers of baser minds. There's only one thing for it then: to learn. Learn why the world wags and what wags it. That is the only thing that the mind can ever exhaust, never alienate, never be tortured by, never fear or distrust, and never dream of regretting. Learning is the thing for you." And when a kid says, "What's the purpose of doing this?" Well, I would suggest to them, one, they misunderstand the notion of purpose, and they also misunderstand the idea of growth. And sometimes growth can be for its own sake. I don't plan on getting a job where I speak German. I don't plan on living in Germany, although if someone would care to offer me something at a very nice salary, I would be happy to consider it. But I mean, there's a lot that I could try to do with all the things that I'm learning now. It's just that I'm doing it for different reasons.
Well, the piece you read, we only have access to things for which we have experienced.
Mhm.
And so a young person reading that will appreciate some of it, but as you grow older, those details become more pregnant, and it makes more sense. And that's kind of the tragedy, that you if you show that to a high school kid, they'll say, "Oh yeah, now I should go learn things."
Right.
But it's true, and this is the old school, and that's what we do.
Right. Well, the passage comes from T.H. White. The
Mm,
name of the book was called "The Once and Future King," and it is the words of an old man to a young man,
right.
because the young man doesn't have the kind of contextual understanding of what he's going through and how to get through it.
Yeah. So you put it up on the wall and come back to it
It's a good thing to come back to. So,
for sure.
and it's part of that. It's part of that endurance. You mean, because the endurance, just because you're not doing it for a productive quote unquote salary point of view or climbing a corporate ladder, doesn't mean it doesn't have value. So there you go.
Thank you, Herr Miller. This turned into a podcast I started with incredulity, wondering how this, what, we started on a somber and maybe a celebratory note of life. And
Indeed.
here we are.
Here we are. All right. Well, thank you for enduring our 2 weeks of absence. Send all letters of complaints to Dr. Bourgeois.
Wow.
But no, we fully plan to be here next week. Maybe it's Thanksgiving. Who knows? I imagine Thanksgiving week we will not do podcast. I will be in Florida. I am traveling to the
Hey,
Sunshine State.
like you were saying earlier, it's always you missing these podcasts, Sir Miller.
No, I always tune in from foreign ports of call. In this case, I can certainly record from Florida. They have the internet there, or so I'm told. But no, I'm going to Florida, going to Naples starting next Friday and Saturday rather, and then that Sunday after Thanksgiving, I'm going to see my beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the very first time at their home
Oh,
stadium.
that's exciting. I thought you were going to watch baseball. I thought they had started up again.
I had to go to Nicaragua or the Dominican for the winter leagues, which I'm all for going, so I'll be up for it. Again, if anyone has a need of someone going to baseball games in the Dominican Republic, please let us know. But no, and then afterwards, where we might be able to record is me from Orlando as my daughter goes to her mecca of Disney World.
Oh, you'll love it. It's set up for grown-ups. They have actually really good restaurants. You've been there, haven't you?
I've never been there. It was never a life
Yeah.
ambition to go. I don't want to go now.
It's perfect.
Uh,
If you want to go to a sports bar, if you want to have, they have like this international town. You can go to what looks like Germany and drink a beer.
but here's the thing. Most people who tell me that that's a place to go for adults, it's always surrounded by alcohol. You could do a pub crawl. You can go to all the different countries.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, that's not the way I roll. I mean, I'll do a beer now and again,
You
but come
need to
on.
drink more because then, no, then you look around and it becomes absurd and funny when you look around and seeing people looking like little mice or whatever they call those people.
Well, I can't tell you how many Disney videos we have seen in preparation for our visit. There's so many people. All they do is go to Disney World.
Yeah.
They don't go to Paris. They don't go to Tokyo. They don't go to Berlin. They go to Orlando and then they make videos about it. And I swear to God, Steve, every time I watch these videos, part of it is that all the videos are filmed during the summer, but no one looks happy. You have anthropomorphic creatures running around. You have screaming, yelling kids, and you have just beaten to high holy hell adults who are hot and sweaty and nasty. And you could tell that they had the best intentions of going with their kids, but they want no part of it.
Oh,
And I don't know.
but this is the time of year to go. The weather will be nicer unless it's raining. It should be beautiful. And it's not about you, Herr Miller. Uh,
I know.
you need to put that on your wall.
It's not about- I have a lot of things already on my wall, so
Yep,
I
yep,
guess I
yep.
can put that up there too.
I think so.
All right, with that, we shall say so long to all of you. Thank you so much for listening and hope that you listen to the next episode. I'm sure it'll be equally witty, funny, introspective, speculative, intellectual, whatever you hope to gain from it. Hopefully, it will be that. Thank you so much for listening. I shall say adieu, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Auf Wiedersehen, Herr Miller.